Welcome to Jody's Silver Linings. I'm your host, Jody Krangle, and I'm here to offer some inspiration and ideas on self-care for fellow creatives. That can include all sorts of things, but generally I like to discuss marketing and branding issues, getting out of your own way, and self-improvement from my geeky voice actor's perspective. Why silver linings? Well, there's plenty of bad in the world, but I prefer to focus on the good. So today's good is Clara Lehmann and Jonathan Lacocque, co-founders of Coat of Arms Post in Helvetia, West Virginia. Clara wrote the award-winning documentary A Perfect Soldier and co-directed and wrote the short animated film Death Loves Life. She's directing and producing Lullaby Theories, an animated series that teaches kids about scientific theories, and a feature-length documentary called Born In A Ballroom. Clara works with clients like Google, Fox, Nickelodeon, The Onion, and WebMD. She has 3 Excellence in Title Design nominations at South by Southwest, and a Gold and Silver Can Lion, and a Webby Nomination. Jonathan has past experience at Post Studios, agencies, and broadcasting companies. His clients include PBS, Verizon, Jaguar Land Rover, Marriott, and Warner Brother Records. He produced and edited the award-winning film A Perfect Soldier, and continues to balance his commercial work with documentary and narrative filmmaking. He's producing and editing multiple feature films and shorts, and continues to explore his passion for original stories with Coat of Arms' Lullaby Theories series and the documentary film Born in a Ballroom. Past awards include an Emmy for editing, several Tellys, and multiple film festival awards. Thanks so much for joining me today, Clara and Jonathan. I really appreciate your taking the time because, wow, does it sound like you two are busy.
Oh, thanks for having us,
Yeah,
Jody.
we're super excited. Thanks for having us on.
It's great to have you here. So, I have to ask, what made you decide to start Coat of Arms, and why the name? So, what were the two of you doing before?
Well, Jonathan should chime in on that for sure. Beforehand, we met in college at a liberal arts school, and we kind of took our own paths. Jonathan went into the PA field, and I went into administration while trying to kind of hone our craft and figure out what we wanted to do.
Hmm.
And then as we built our own resumes up, we slowly started to fall into what we liked about production and post-production. And Jonathan had this idea to start a company because he was maybe a little tired of working for others, and he knew he had the ability and the chops to work for himself. And
Yeah.
tell him about how you chose Coat of Arms, the name. I think it's interesting.
Well, I think, yeah, so the name, I guess, first of all, like, we wanted to have a name that was sort of memorable and had some form of meaning to us.
Hmm.
And I don't think I can take complete credit for the name. Clara is quite creative. But in the end, we thought coat of arms was really great, especially in the sense that, in heraldic times, and still, you have family crests. But back then, it was a way to sort of see allies from enemies or sort of stake your claim on some sort of presence or branding.
Hmm.
And we thought that was sort of a fun play on, some of the work we do specific to like corporate and commercial clients where we're doing branding and we're doing videos that are helping tell stories as a perspective for a company or a brand. So coat of arms felt like a nice way to,
Yeah.
speak to
Hmm.
that as well as just say like, hey, align yourself with us. We are your allies
Yeah, your
creatively
shield. Yeah.
and are shielding you from some of maybe the struggles that non-creative folks have in being creative.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I think culturally too, we're both interested in just the idea of maintaining identity with your roots. And I grew up in a Swiss like village in the mountains of Appalachia in Helvetia. It's called Helvetia, West Virginia,
Hmm.
and there's a really significant push for the children there and the families to hold on to some of our folk culture. There's even shields all throughout the community. It's kind of ironic that we'd end up with a shield as our logo. And
Yeah.
then Jonathan is Cuban Belgian, so a first generation American. And I think that there's that struggle that is true and real to hold on to those immigrant identities, but while still melding into the American culture. And I think that was a means for this logo represents both of us quite nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are layers of meaning,
Yeah, for each of us.
for each of us, which is kind of cool.
That is really great. Yeah. So obviously you work together. So what is it like to work together as a husband-wife team in the same company? I mean, how do you balance your work life with your home life?
Oh, it's just awful. Um, no, it's actually, pretty phenomenal. I think that we're best friends, and that's the truth of the matter, so it really helps that we like to spend time together and,
Mhm.
like to raise our family together, but also work together on creative, projects. I think it's strange, and maybe it's cliché to say, but, like, what I excel at Jonathan may not, and what he excels at, I don't.
Mhm.
So there's this very nice yin and yang for us that feels very comfortable, but at the same time, we push each other in a very positive way. What
Yeah,
else?
I mean, I think both with work life and home life, we definitely work well together, complement each other, love each other. So
Mhm.
there's built-in trust and safety as well in terms of like,
Yeah.
going to work and trying new things or having, being under pressure or exploring new boundaries creatively. Like, I think that we're lucky to have a foundation that allows us to do those things and to kind of watch out for each other.
Sure, you have each other's backs, yeah.
Yeah, we have each other's backs. Yeah, as well as just complementing, like Clara said, each of our strengths are different. So we are so much better together than
Mhm.
alone. And so we lean into that both at home and
Yeah,
at work.
I always think of film, and a lot of the arts are collaborative. And in this sense, I feel like I wouldn't be as good alone. And I think that I feel like very comfortable being like, I can have a terrible idea and still express it. And there might be a little tiny piece that's good. And Jonathan will find that, or like the silver lining you're talking about, Jody.
Yeah.
There's always something that we can kind of propel ourselves forward with the conversation. And there are hard moments like, we have twin daughters and they are in school now, but before they were in school, we had to find that balance of how do you get all the diapers changed and the babies fed and in bed
Yeah.
while still trying to meet the demands of a corporate client or for our own sanity, some of those creative projects that we just wanted to do. And
Mhm.
somehow we did it, but we had a lot of like little support too, like built in from the family and friends, and
Sure.
we're both just hard workers.
That's good.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to mention too. I mean, part of what I think works well for us is that we have similar values and similar priorities in life,
Mhm.
and then we also both are hard workers. And so, because like I don't know that I would necessarily recommend a partnership to just anybody.
Sure. Yeah.
I think it really depends on who you're partnering with and who each person is and making sure each can still be themselves within a complementary way within that sort of,
Mhm.
partnering. But I think it works for us because there's never really, I don't know, I've worked at other places where some people work way harder than others, and it's
Yeah.
hard not to feel resentment, and then it's also hard not to feel guilt from the other side. And so, or, whether that's internalized guilt or
Yeah.
externalized, but so I think it works well in that both Clara and I are passionate and love what we do and work
Mhm.
hard at it.
That's wonderful. So, going back to your twin daughters, what inspired Lullaby Theories?
That's a great question. So, really, I mean, Clara and I are always coming up with little shorts and ideas that we want to tell and to make, and we don't finish most of them. There's sort of like
Yeah.
this, rain cloud of ideas constantly falling. But in this instance, we were working on a really big project, and about 80% of the way through the project, found out that it was completely changing, and none of the work that we had done would be seen.
Oh,
And we
ow.
had this amazing team of artists, pulled together and kind of said, "Hey, we've got maybe it was like two more weeks or something with the team."
Mhm.
And it's like, hey, we've had this idea where we want to do something with our kids, something that's scientific or science oriented to sort of both introduce them into like
Mhm.
theories and thinking about these things. They're both girls, so like getting them into STEM and all that sort of thing. But
Sure.
then also just for us, I think Claire and I naturally have an interest in science. So Clara went and just wrote the first script of Lullaby Theories in like
Really quickly,
like
because
a few hours.
we had literally no
And
time.
yeah, and then we went and we recorded with Lucy and Sophia and edited it together really quickly, and then kind of sent our team off with some direction on.
And we literally used like not we changed that slightly, but we used some of the inspiration from those like throwaways in order to like propel into this project, so
Hmm.
Right.
that it wouldn't completely be one of
For
those things
naught.
that hits on, yeah, it's just hitting the cutting floor, and we were
Yeah.
disappointed to see that go away, so we just found a way to make that, to propel it into something different.
Yeah, I love the improvisation kind of that are in there. It kind of feels like you're sort of doing it in the moment, which I really, really love.
Sure.
Yeah, I have to say that sometimes that feels like the best work. Not only
Hmm.
improvisation, but like just I can't like authentic, but also vulnerable. And
Hmm.
like you feel a little vulnerable in those moments when you're told your work's not going to make it into something, or it's going to be
Yeah.
thrown away. And then you're also vulnerable in that it's your children and yourself. And
Hmm.
I think that sometimes all of us humans end up tapping into something that is a bit more connective or special when when you get there, and it's hard to get
Hmm.
there, but and it's hard to accept that sometimes, but I think it's
Sure.
very important.
Yeah, well, and it's nice to have time to explore and
Of
try
course.
things. And I think in with Lullaby Theories in particular, not that in this the first one we had a ton of time,
Hmm.
but when we're recording with the girls, there's a lot of, having them watch things and sort of tell us what they're seeing or like
Yeah.
making things up, like, hey, what do you think this is, and then they
Hmm.
come up with things we could have never imagined,
Yeah.
or responses.
Kids, huh?
Oh yeah, totally. So, I mean, that's really part of the joy for us too, is just, hey, what do you think happens? What do you think is going on in a parallel world,
Right, it's a time capsule for us to hold on to too, for them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I bet it would be a wonderful thing to keep. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love the joy in explosions.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so true, that feels a
That's
lot
true.
like what it is like, I think.
Right. Well, and they love it, explosion. Yeah,
Yeah, it was just
they love it.
adorable. And I
Oh
mean, like,
man, they
I
love it.
don't think even people who don't have kids, like, I don't think you have to have kids to enjoy these. They're just adorable.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's funny, we also are doing these, for them, and
Mhm.
Lucy and Sophia get to go to the film festivals and, get asked Q&As, and so this is also sort of an introduction to them in terms of like, hey, this is what mom and dad do, and
Mhm.
this is something that you could do down the road if you want,
Yeah.
and also just a way for them to understand like when we're sitting at a computer at work, this is kind of the thing that's going on behind the scenes, so it isn't as
Mhm.
much of a mystery. Um, but I also think, like, on the other side, for people watching, kind of like to what you were saying, we also wanted to create something that was, I don't know, calm and have an educational aspect, but just be enjoyable. And it's funny because, you know, like Lars, who's your brother, says like, sometimes when he's nervous, let's say in college or just can't go to sleep, he'll go and he'll watch one of these because like it's just so
Peaceful.
coughed and peaceful, like you said.
Yeah, I thought
Mhm.
that was such a sweet compliment. He said that when he misses home or he's a little anxious before a big exam, he plays that at night to fall asleep to. And I was like very touched. I mean, first of all, it's just
That's
so
so
sweet
sweet.
that
Yeah.
it brings him comfort, but also that, well, he loves us very much, obviously. So
He's a little biased.
yeah, exactly. But I was glad that that helped, helped in some way. But outside of just even the science, it was just the comfort of hearing us and hearing the song in the
Mhm.
background and things like that.
Yeah.
Then one other thing I'll add really quick is that, and kind of going back to the question of like why we even started the company, I feel like, Claire and I have both worked at a lot of different places, and it can be really challenging to be completely, let's say, creatively fulfilled.
Hmm.
And so by
Mhm.
creating Coat of Arms, we are in control of what we say yes and no to and how finances are used. And so for us, like, both because of just the model, the way that coat of arms works, but also just in terms of our desires. We work really hard to do things that, we and our design director Ryan and our artists that we work with want to do, and the stories we want to tell. Whereas, like, when you work for an agency or a post house
Mm-hmm.
or anywhere, frankly, like, owners have their own desires of which is fair.
Mm-hmm.
They have their own, drives and needs they need to fulfill, and
Obligations,
Yeah,
right?
obligations,
sure.
exactly. And so this is our way to, have fun and not get lost, let's say, in the dollars or
Mm-hmm.
the return on investment, for big corporations or something.
Yeah. Well, along those lines, I'd like to ask you also, because obviously you love to create just for the love of creating, but how do you balance the paid work with the creative work?
Well, I think one main way, I guess, is that because it is such a priority to us, we are always looking at, let's say, like jobs that are coming in,
Mm-hmm.
the finances that are coming in, and then looking at the calendar in such a way that we can carve out time and some of those finances to put towards personal projects. Like there are companies that do the 80-20 rule, or you work 4 days and that fifth day is a time for exploration, or certain number of months for paid work and a certain number of months for research and development.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we're pretty similar in that we aren't as structural with it, I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
say.
Yeah, I
It
agree.
kind of like, sometimes we'll go a few months with a ton of personal projects, which is
Mm-hmm.
amazing, and then we'll go a few months with literally no personal projects. So
Yeah.
yeah, we allow the change of the seasons from a financial forecasting perspective to dictate a little bit, like, hey, we can really have fun right now. Let's do it. Versus like, hey, we have a lot of, obligations right now that we need to fulfill.
Mm-hmm.
But when we
Yeah.
finish, but we make time for it
I
too.
think emotionally too, sometimes there's a difference between a project that might feel like something that you can be like, I know I have to do this and I want to do it and I feel interested in it, but at the same time, I can get through it without like some of the bigger demands of a personal project.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a personal project can be very overwhelming, and that like you just want it to meet a certain standard that maybe feel like a reach or whatever. And that's a wonderful feeling to have, but sometimes it's really great to have those like, hey, this is a 2-minute video I'm going to do, and my client is going to say when and if it feels like it's done. I'm going to put myself into it, yes, but there's this at least a little bit of a release of like I can let go at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one thing we've had trouble with certain projects is like when it's a personal project, when do you say you're done? And when is it good enough? And
Mm-hmm.
you have to just sometimes you literally have to like cut the apron strings and just let it go like a child. And sometimes with corporate projects, you don't have a choice. There's a deadline and it's over. And those have been very rewarding too. And I think um, have taught us to let go of those personal projects faster, a
Mm-hmm.
little bit faster.
Yeah. It's a great way to look at it. Yeah.
We don't always succeed, but we try, right?
Yeah, it can be hard. Yeah, I get it. When you got to know when good enough is good enough.
Right.
Yeah, truly.
Yeah.
Totally.
And
I,
sometimes you can over adjust. I do
Mm-hmm.
believe that, but yeah.
Yeah.
And one other thing really quick I'll add is
Mm-hmm.
that, from a technical standpoint, it is really important for us to do the personal work because, clients tend to have their own, again, like stylistic desires and, even obligations or
Sure.
branding obligations. So like for us to continue to develop our capabilities, doing personal work allows us to really push and try new things. So it's really important, I think, for us as artists to spend that time
Mm-hmm.
exploring and trying things that may or may not work because it's for us,
Yeah. Speaking of that, as a creative couple, I know you both have probably experienced a great deal of, let's call them learning experiences. I'm not really going to call them failures because we always learn something, right? So, how do you deal with those?
Well, I've always found that whenever you have like a failed, it could be something a little bigger, like an entire project get cut, like we were describing earlier, or something where maybe your gut is saying, I need to fire myself on this project. We've done that before. I think that I always find that a lot of wisdom, and that's a cheesy thing to say, but a lot of wisdom is gained from those. And so,
Mm-hmm.
because you can really beat yourself up about a failure,
Oh,
you can
totally. Yeah.
stay up at night and worry and things like that. And I think if you always step back and be like, well, I know I'm going to learn something from this, and I need to again, that letting go,
Yeah.
it really is a good a good thing to go through and a good exercise to force yourself to, because if you're not failing, sometimes I think that means, unless you're just, I don't know, you're God and you're amazing, but I think if you're not failing, you're not testing yourself enough. Like,
Yeah.
you're not pushing yourself as hard as you should be.
Mm-hmm.
You're just too comfortable, and I think that's when you would see that your work is probably getting a little static and or stagnant and not progressing.
Mm-hmm.
So I would encourage you to throw in a failure once every 10 times and
Or
yeah.
more.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think we quote
Some
unquote,
of us can't help it.
right, yeah, sure, sure. I do think, yeah, failure is really, not to sound cheesy, is like an opportunity to grow, really, like,
Mm-hmm.
and I like what you were saying, Clara. It's like, if we're not failing in some ways, like, are we really pushing ourselves or testing boundaries creatively or
Yeah, it's a good
technically
point.
or
And I think sometimes what we as an individual see as a failure, others would be like, well, what are you talking about? That's not really true failure.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's, you've got to have the appropriate lens on it, and so that you don't get lost in a depression, or
yeah,
because artists are often that way. Like, they get bummed when a project ends, and it's like, oh, it went great. Why are you so bummed? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I've got that like postpartum depression of I'm talking about babies a lot. I don't know what's
Gee, I wonder why.
no, I mean, I'm not pregnant, but well, anyway, but I just think that it's a wonderful thing to go through. It feels like shit during it, but
Mm-hmm.
it is good. And
I think too, to get maybe psychological for a second, I think as artists, it's like really important to get as much failure out of the way as possible,
Yeah.
so that your skin
Mm-hmm.
thickens. You learn that, like, I mean, literally everybody goes through it. Like, there is no person that's like, I'm going to learn to draw, and then draws like, I don't know, something
yeah,
phenomenal, and then wins awards and money and their life is set.
right.
Nobody,
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody fails,
Yeah,
struggles. And so
yeah, it
it's
doesn't have to be
important.
art. It could be socially. It can
Right.
be, whatever. It's
Well, yeah,
yeah.
and I feel like if you think of it that way, it's almost like you can, lean in to the failure. Like, hey, let's get these failures over with,
Yeah.
or like, let's just go for it so we can learn and get better and, thicken our skin and
You have to spend a certain amount of hours that, are failures
Yeah.
yeah,
to get to the
right,
successes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll
totally.
never forget, particularly one of my biggest, I thought, was a failure, was I went to law school thinking I wanted to be an
Mm-hmm.
attorney. And I did a full semester and did well, but hated it and hated myself in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I quit. And I remember calling my dad and my mom and a few people, and just feeling so just like wanting to hide, like
Mm-hmm.
wanting to just cover up in the bed and sleep for days and not come out and not let anyone see me. And I think that that's what a lot of people feel when they feel like they failed. But in the end, I came through it. Of course, it took a little while, but I think that first experience of like a failure that you may have disappointed someone else was very positive for me, in that it made me be like, okay, wait a minute, what did I learn from this that
Mm-hmm.
has let me step forward in other ways, and what skills or crafts have I garnered from going to law school for a semester that are now in what I want to do and what I love. And you'd be shocked how much more I'm using from that period than I am from my successes. Like, my
Mm-hmm.
success for writing a paper or doing something else is not really informing what I'm doing now, whereas that failure in law school is totally informing what I'm doing now.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, think of it even this way, like, without that failure, you wouldn't be with me in Coat of Arms. You'd be a
Sure.
lawyer, you'd be, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? If we hadn't moved to West Virginia to go to law school, like, maybe we wouldn't be living here, like,
Right.
there's just so many, and if we didn't move here, maybe we wouldn't have had twins.
Right.
Like, there's just so many huge things that have come even out of that.
You did a lullaby theory on this, didn't you? I think you might have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
parallel worlds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of amazing to think of in that sense too. It's
Mhm.
like you've got to be okay with the path you're on, and take
And own
control as
it.
much as you
Yeah, you
can, but
gotta
then
own it.
also
Sure.
allow, hey, the path's going to lead in some different directions, and let's see where it goes.
Yeah, and at the very least, you learned about yourself. I mean, as we're growing as human beings, we have to learn what we like and what we don't like and what fulfills us and what doesn't. So, that's a good learning experience right there.
For sure. Yeah, and I mean, from a personal standpoint, I also think the failures influence our learning from like again, a psychological or philosophical side
Mhm.
the most too, because it's like, you always have a choice of how you respond, to things that happen to you in life,
Mhm.
and that's super hard to do. It's hard to always respond well or
Yeah,
positively in the
definitely.
negative. But it's I think a good challenge to put ourselves to and remind ourselves that like, hey, like this, I may not have control over what happened, but I do have control over how I decide to move on from it.
Mhm.
And there's power in that.
Yeah, there totally is. Actually, leading into another question, obviously these learning experiences and failures have to be dealt with, right? So there's stress, there's self doubt, there's, things that go on in our own heads. I mean, obviously, the two of you have experienced this. So, how do you deal with that? Do you have any tips for people on how to maybe figure out how to frame it in a different way?
I think the first two things I would say is one, like talk to somebody. I think Claire and I are lucky that we have each other to kind of talk through the emotions and the issues that come with sometimes the stressors, the failures, those sorts of things. So
Hmm.
at least for me, like you can attest to this, like
Mhm.
talking through things is really important for me. So it's nice to have someone to say, hey, like, man, did we really mess up, or did I screw up, or I'm scared or I'm feeling anxious about this, and just having someone that can kind of help you through it, I think is really important.
Hmm.
And then the other is time. I think for me, again, like I definitely, I'm a type A. I think like I dive into things,
Hmm.
I'm always excited about what's next. And so sometimes it can be difficult to sort of step back and, whether it's like as simple as going for a walk or sleeping on it, or meditation or
Hmm.
whatever it is. It's just like take time after, a failure, or take time when you are feeling stressed to say, hey, I'm feeling stressed. I'm going to step away from the computer. I'm going to step away from what's bothering me so I at least have time to like process a little
Mhm.
bit, because I
Yeah,
think that's
typically
super
whenever
important.
you put a problem or a failure into the grander scheme, it always is not as big as you think it is. And
Mhm.
that step away or sleeping on it, my mom always says, Clara, it always looks better in the morning. It always looks better in the morning. So, at
She
night
has
we
a good
can,
point.
yeah, we beat ourselves up and we'll, be like awake all night worrying about something, letting it fester. And sometimes you just literally need to let a day or two pass before you make some reflections and make some positive steps forward. And I do think there's, little things you can do, like a checklist or little things to get through those parts, because sometimes the anxiety is so heavy that you don't know what to do with yourself in between.
Mhm.
But when you've had that aha moment and when you've had the problem, so checklists or exercise. Again, communicating with someone you trust, being allowed to kind of say exactly how you feel without a filter, that's a big deal. Like, I don't think sometimes I'm not sure people uh, feel completely comfortable taking off that filter. And
Mhm.
it's very important to do that sometimes, because then if you find that person you trust and you can just barf on the page,
Yeah.
even if it's just to yourself, I think it's a positive thing for your mental health. And then you're more likely to move forward with positive steps and not go and do a nasty thing to someone that you're going to resent
Mhm.
later. Like, you don't want to be ugly to your client or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Right. And stepping away helps with that for sure.
Yeah.
I do. The only other thing I'll add is that I think structure can be kind of important,
Hmm.
like both structure and allowing for there not to be structure, but
Sure.
like I think one reason a lot of artists in particular are so big on routine, like, oh, I get up and I
Mhm.
spend this amount of time writing or drawing or whatever, is because when you have some sort of structure in place, it allows you to lose it, so like,
Sure.
hey, I'm just naturally waking up at this
Mm-hmm.
time and getting to work at this time because I am now created this behavior in myself that's like muscle memory. So now I feel like I have this time to just let go or explore
Mm-hmm.
or allow things to happen.
Agreed. I think the only other thing I would mention for getting through failure is surrounding yourself with people who are experts and
Mm-hmm.
who have also experienced failure and have gotten through it as well. Like when we work on a project and it's not going well, man, does it feel good to have a team behind you that is just, first of all, lovely and good people,
Mm-hmm.
but second of all, they are experts at dealing with this and they know, like, listen, we just pivot, like here we pivot again,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Yeah.
think that that is so relieving and is a super important thing to maybe consider for your next project.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. I would almost lean a little more into like the people around you being good people that care, that are easygoing, like, because
Yeah.
even if they aren't the expert, it's nice to have somebody that's like, hey, let's figure it out.
Well, sure. Yeah.
Rather than living in the negative or not being able to manage their own stress maybe very well or
Well,
something.
you're the sum of the closest five people, right? The five closest people to you are probably your greatest influencers, whether they're experts in your field or not. So, sort of along the same lines, what do the two of you do to be kinder to yourselves? Because, as creatives, as we've mentioned many times already, we're very hard on ourselves. So, do you two do things together? Do you do things separately? Do you have different approaches to relaxing?
Well, I think that mostly they would be pretty similar as a
Mm.
husband wife team. We have very similar interests, and we want to, outside of work, have a relationship that is romantic as well.
Sure.
And I think some things that we do are, I mean, obviously, we're parents, we spend time with our
Mhm.
children. That always, it's such a, I mean, that is like, oddly enough, it could be, hard, but a very huge relief. There's just a lot of laughter
Sure.
and happiness and distraction there.
Mhm.
Yeah, true. I think distraction,
Yeah.
even when it's difficult,
Yeah.
it is a distraction
Yeah.
from the other, and it sort of grounds you in this reality of like, okay, no,
Bigger
this is
picture,
important,
bigger picture. Yeah, and I remember a few times we've gotten calls that were pretty negative or feedback that was rough, and then you just kind of like go make dinner and spend time with the kids laughing, or maybe it's not laughter, maybe there's annoyance and they're jiving off of your anxiety a little bit, but I think
Mhm.
that that still helps. We exercise, so we go for runs. We
Mhm.
live in a very rural area where we can hike in the woods, and
Nice.
I can't tell you how much nature. I think it's critical to all humans. Like we need to really get back to that a little bit more. And I think if you don't live in a rural area or in a wooded area, I would suggest the lake or just a bike path or something. Just do something
Sure.
that gets you into nature. I promise it helps.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's another grounding, you know what I mean, in another kind of reality of like, hey, we're part of something beyond just
Yeah.
Yeah.
the client's demands
Right. This
and
fake world that is,
Yeah, like
yeah.
you said, bigger picture, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Dogs, pets, that's a good way. Well, we have a dog. We love her.
Mm.
She helps.
Mhm.
I think too, I think Jonathan's been really good about this with me because I would have an internal voice that was very negative sometimes.
Mhm.
And I think every time I've heard other people say this too, but every time you think you're going to say something ugly about yourself in your head or saying something that's negative, see if you can turn it around and turn it into a positive. And I
Mhm.
don't mean to be fake. Like, I'm not saying to say fake things or say things that are untrue. I'm just saying be cognizant of what you're saying to yourself in your head, flip it, and then say something that is a positive side of it. Like if it's like, oh, I'm not very good at XYZ, then turn it around and say, but why am I, if I'm not good at that, I might be good at something else, or,
Mhm.
why that's okay, or something like that.
Yeah, words matter.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think the only, I mean, that's great. I agree with all of that. The only addition from me would be prioritize yourself. Like I think that's something that we do is that we try to prioritize ourselves in that,
Mhm.
in order for us to take care of our children, we need to be taken care of. And in order
Yeah.
for us to have energy at work, we need to make sure we get enough sleep. In order for us to, also have energy, we need to like eat healthy
Mm-hmm.
and exercise and find ways for us to release our anxieties, our angers, the things that naturally come on, and just have compassion for yourself. And I think this is again where, like, and I'm biased, I think we're lucky to have each other, in
Mm-hmm.
that like we again are looking out for each other. So when we see, or I'll say when I see like Clara being like beating herself up, because I think like we are always the harshest critics of ourselves. And so I
Yeah.
think we need to also, I don't know, like respond to that with also being having the most compassion for ourselves as possible, but having somebody who loves you with you is really helpful, because then
Yeah.
they're like, oh, hey, why are you doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Or like, hey, look, you did this and this is great, or feel better, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we need to learn almost as a species, and especially as artists and people who are vulnerable naturally, to just have empathy for everybody, but that includes
Yeah, if you
ourselves.
can't have it for yourself, you're not going to have it for others. So,
Yeah, that's very true. Well, I think we're coming to the end here, but I wanted to ask you what you're working on now and where people can find out more about it.
sure. Well, we just finished Born in a Ballroom, our feature-length documentary, and that will be screening. We're not allowed to release where it will screen yet as a premiere, but it's out in California.
Okay.
And we'll release that shortly with if you log in and what's that called?
Join our
Join our
mailing list.
mailing list, so you'll
Okay.
find out, or just check out our site.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But we're also working on several WebMD videos
Mm-hmm.
that are really exciting. 2 documentaries and like a campaign about heart
Oh,
disease
mm-hmm.
and heart failure, and how that impacts, specifically how that's impacted by type 2 diabetes quite often. Those are very interesting, and they're mostly educational. The 2 documentaries are more emotive and stories, but
Mm-hmm.
the 3 little shorter campaigns are supposed to be educational for the site.
Wonderful.
And we're also working on South by Southwest titles, and we've done that. This will be our 3rd year in a row.
Oh, great.
You want to chime in about those,
Oh,
Jonathan?
I mean, we're excited. It's basically another one of these almost like personal projects,
Mm-hmm.
but it's for a festival that we love. So we always have fun kind of
Sure.
pushing creative limits and pulling together teams of people that, we always want to work with, but maybe don't always get the chance because it's a style or something
Yeah.
that, maybe a corporate client doesn't want to do. Yeah, and I mean, we're working with Google Cloud on creating, there's a place called Chase Center in San Francisco
Mm-hmm.
where the Golden State Warriors play, and we're doing a bunch of animations for like the ribbon screens inside of the arena and the
Wow.
plaza and that type of thing for specific Google Cloud, because they're a sponsor for the venue.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I think we're continuing to try to mix the corporate with the personal, and
It's all great. Yeah.
I will say, like, definitely people can go to borninaballroom.com. That's,
Mm-hmm.
it has a ton of information about the documentary that we're working on, which is personal to us, but hopefully can speak to, everybody, but
Sure.
to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then our website is coatofarmspost.com, and that's where you can join our mailing list. You
Mm-hmm.
can check out some of this work we've been talking about and stay in touch with us.
Fantastic.
The only other one that I think that Jody was mentioning that people might enjoy is the lullabytheories.com, which is those are the 4 episodes with the children's
Mm-hmm.
voices and my voice basically expressing, oh, how does this science work? What's this? So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting and cute.
Are you going to be making more of them, or is 4 the limit?
Well, we would love to make more. But Born in a Ballroom got in the way a little bit because we
Sure.
were wrapping up on post on that with the feature, and now that we're trying to promote it on the flip side of it being finished, we're kind of obligated to at least try to see if we can get that film out a little
Mm-hmm.
farther reach than just our backyard.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, but yes, we would love to do another season of 4. I think it comes down to just finances, like we've poured all of our own finances into
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
project. So we'll see if we want to do that again, or would we rather do something new? While this is a formula that seems to work and people enjoy it, it's, how artists are. We're always like, what's
Sure.
different that I can do?
So, yeah, I guess that about wraps it up then. I really appreciate your taking the time to talk with me, and I know that this will inspire a lot of people.
Awesome.
Oh,
Well,
thank you,
hey,
Jody.
yeah, thanks for having us, Jody. We love working with you and love
Likewise.
chatting with you. So this was
Yeah, it's
great.
been a lot of fun. Well, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening and keep looking for those silver linings. Remember to be kind to yourself. Until next time.